In all his years of hosting Family Feud, Steve Harvey had encountered families from every walk of life, each bringing their own stories, their own hopes, and their own dreams to his stage. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to unfold on that crisp December afternoon. Nothing could have prepared him for Catherine Wilson. Catherine Miss Kate Wilson sat quietly in the contestant holding area, her hands folded peacefully in her lap as she watched the organized chaos of television production swirl around her. At 58, she possessed the kind of quiet dignity that could only come from a lifetime spent in service to others. Her silver hair was styled simply but elegantly, and she wore a deep purple blouse that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. But those eyes, while still kind, carried something that the casual observer might miss. They carried the weight of knowledge that time was running out. 3 months. That's what the doctors had told her 6 weeks ago when the test results came back. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, aggressive and merciless. 3 months, maybe 4 if she was lucky and the treatments went well. But Catherine Wilson, who had spent 35 years teaching 4th grade at Roosevelt Elementary in inner-city Detroit, had never believed in luck. She believed in love, in dedication, in the power of one person to change the world one child at a time. And she believed that some stories needed to be told, especially when time was running short. The Wilson family was unlike any other that had ever appeared on Family Feud. Technically, they weren't related by blood. Catherine had never married, had never had children of her own. But the 4 people standing with her, Marcus Thompson, 28, Aisha Johnson, 31, Daniel Rodriguez, 26, and LaShonda Williams, 29, were more than family. They were her legacy. Marcus, who had been a troubled 9-year-old when he first walked into Miss Kate's classroom, was now a successful engineer. Aisha, who had come from a broken home and seemed destined for failure, was now a pediatric nurse. Daniel, who had struggled with reading until Miss Kate spent countless after-school hours with him, was now a published author. LaShonda, who had been labeled unteachable by other educators, was now a teacher herself, carrying on Miss Kate's mission. They had contacted Family Feud producers 6 months ago when the symptoms first started, but before the diagnosis came. They wanted to do something special for the woman who had saved their lives, who had seen potential where others saw problems, who had loved them when they couldn't love themselves. What they didn't know was that their beloved teacher was fighting the battle of her life. Catherine had made the decision not to tell them about the cancer. Not yet. She wanted this moment, this celebration of the lives they had built together, to be pure, untainted by pity or sadness. There would be time for goodbye later. Right now, she wanted to simply bask in the warmth of their success, their love, their living proof that her life had mattered. Steve Harvey emerged from his dressing room with his usual pre-show energy, but something about the Wilson family immediately caught his attention. Maybe it was the way they looked at Catherine, not just with affection, but with reverence. Maybe it was the careful way they positioned themselves around her, as if protecting something precious. Or maybe it was something in Catherine's eyes, a depth that spoke of someone who had seen both the best and worst of humanity, and had chosen to focus on the best. During the family introduction, Steve found himself drawn to Catherine in a way that was unusual even for him. "Miss Kate," he said, using the name her former students had introduced her with, "these young people sure do seem to think highly of you." Catherine smiled, and for a moment the studio seemed to brighten. "Mr. Harvey, I was blessed to be their teacher, but the truth is, they taught me far more than I ever taught them." 35 years in the classroom, Steve said, reading from his notes. "That's a lot of young lives touched. What kept you going all those years?" Catherine's answer would haunt Steve long after the camera stopped rolling. "The hope, Mr. Harvey. Every September, I'd look at a new group of faces and see 30 possibilities, 30 chances to change the world." She paused, her voice taking on a quality that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "And the faith that somewhere out there, those children would grow up and make the world a little brighter because someone believed in them when they couldn't believe in themselves." The game began normally enough. The Wilson family was competing against the Patterson family from Atlanta, and both teams brought enthusiasm and competitive spirit to the stage. Catherine surprised everyone with her quick wit and strategic thinking. When asked to name something teachers wish they could tell parents, She buzzed in with, "Your children are capable of so much more than you know," earning the #1 answer and a thunderous applause from the studio audience. Marcus, Aisha, Daniel, and LaShonda played with the kind of synchronized thinking that comes from shared experience and mutual respect. They had grown up in Miss Kate's classroom, had learned not just reading and math, but how to support each other, how to think as a team. The Wilson family swept through the early rounds with a combination of strategy and heart that had Steve Harvey impressed and the audience fully invested in their success. But it was during the fast money round that Catherine Wilson would change Steve Harvey's life forever. The family had won the right to play fast money, and after a quick huddle, they had chosen Marcus to go first. He managed to score 56 points, leaving Catherine needing just 44 points to win the $20,000 prize. As Catherine positioned herself at the fast money podium, something shifted in her demeanor. The competitive energy that had carried her through the main game gave way to something more contemplative, more profound. Steve approached with his usual fast money energy, but those who knew him well could see that he was paying special attention to Catherine. There was something about her presence that commanded respect, that suggested this was more than just a game. "Miss Kate," Steve said warmly, "Marcus got us 56 points, which means you need 44 to win $20,000 for your family. You ready?" Catherine nodded, but her eyes had taken on a distant quality, as if she was seeing beyond the studio lights, beyond the cameras, beyond the moment itself. "I'm ready, Mr. Harvey. I've been ready for this my whole life." 20 seconds on the clock, Steve announced. "Here we go. Name something teachers want most." The question hung in the air for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. Catherine looked directly at Steve, then at her former students watching from the family area, then into the camera that would carry her words to millions of viewers. When she spoke, her voice carried 35 years of wisdom, love, and heartbreak. To be remembered. Steve paused, struck by something in her tone that went beyond a simple game show answer. "Name something that makes a teacher's job worthwhile." "Watching your children succeed," Catherine answered without hesitation. Steve continued, but something in Catherine's responses was affecting him in a way he couldn't quite identify. Each answer seemed to carry more weight than a typical fast money response. "Name something teachers do after school hours." "Worry about their kids," Catherine said, and Steve caught the way she emphasized their kids, not the kids or students, but their kids. "Name something every teacher hopes for." Catherine's pause was longer this time. When she spoke, her voice was softer, more reflective, that their love made a difference. The final question would shatter everything. "Name something teachers never stop doing." Catherine looked directly at Steve, and for the first time since the round began, she smiled, but it wasn't the competitive smile of someone trying to win a game. It was the peaceful smile of someone who had found exactly the right words for exactly the right moment. The studio fell completely silent. The answer was beautiful, profound, but there was something in the way Catherine had said, "They won't be there," that hit Steve like a physical blow. He looked at her more closely, really looked at her, and suddenly saw what he had missed before. The slight weight loss that good makeup had disguised, the careful way she moved, as if conserving energy, the peaceful acceptance in her eyes that spoke of someone who had made peace with something unthinkable. "Miss Kate," Steve said, his voice uncertain for the first time in years. "Are you okay?" Catherine's smile never wavered. "Mr. Harvey, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with the people I'm supposed to be with, saying the things I'm supposed to say." Steve set down his cards, his game show host instincts completely overwhelmed by a growing sense that he was missing something crucial. "Miss Kate, when you said teachers believe in tomorrow, even when they won't be there to see it, what did you mean?" The question that followed would change everything. "Mr. Harvey, what would you do if you had 3 months to say goodbye to everyone who mattered to you?" The studio seemed to stop breathing. Steve felt the blood drain from his face as the full meaning of Catherine's words hit him. "Miss Kate, are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that doctors give timelines, but teachers know that the real measure of a life isn't how long it lasts, but how much love it leaves behind." Catherine's voice was steady, peaceful, but the revelation crashed through the studio like thunder. Steve Harvey, who had built a career on maintaining composure under any circumstances, completely broke down. The cards fell from his hands, scattering across the stage. His legs seemed to give out and he had to lean against the podium for support. "Miss Kate," he whispered, "how long have you known?" "6 weeks," she replied simply. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say 3 months, maybe 4. Steve looked at Marcus, Aisha, Daniel, and LaShonda, who were standing frozen in shock. Their faces showed that this was the first time they were hearing this news. "Do they know?" Steve asked. Catherine shook her head. "I wanted this to be about celebration, not sadness. I wanted them to remember me like this, proud of who they've become, surrounded by joy. What happened next would become the most talked about moment in television history." Steve Harvey walked away from the podium, away from the cameras, toward the back of the stage. For 30 seconds, he stood there with his back to the studio, his shoulders shaking with emotion. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of his breakdown. When he turned around, his face was streaked with tears, but his voice carried a determination that filled the entire studio. "We're not finishing this game," he announced. "We're not doing fast money anymore, we're doing something else." He walked directly to Catherine and knelt down beside her. "Miss Kate, you said teachers want to be remembered. I want to do something about that. Right now." Steve turned to his production team. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care how long it takes. I want every student this woman ever taught to know what's happening here today." He looked directly into the main camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to do something that's never been done before. We're going to turn this studio into a classroom, Miss Kate's classroom." Behind the scenes, producers were frantically making phone calls. The Wilson family's appearance had been months in the planning, but what viewers didn't know was that the producers had been secretly reaching out to Catherine's former students for weeks, hoping to surprise her. They had found dozens of them, scattered across the country, all eager to pay tribute to the teacher who had changed their lives. What they hadn't known was that this surprise would become something infinitely more precious. A final gift to a dying teacher. "Miss Kate," Steve said, "you taught for 35 years. You touched thousands of lives. Those students are all grown up now, and they have things they want to say to you." The studio doors opened, and former students began walking onto the stage. First came David Chen, now a doctor, who had been in Miss Kate's class 22 years ago. "Miss Kate," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you taught me that being different wasn't a weakness. You saved my life." Then came Maria Santos, now a social worker, who had struggled with poverty and family instability. "You made sure I had food to eat and clothes to wear. You made me believe I deserved better." One by one, they kept coming. Former students who were now teachers, doctors, engineers, artists, parents, pillars of their communities. Each one carried a story of how Catherine Wilson had seen something in them that others had missed, had believed in them when they couldn't believe in themselves. By the time the parade of former students ended, there were over 60 people on the Family Feud stage. 60 lives that had been touched, shaped, and saved by one teacher's love. Catherine sat in the middle of it all, surrounded by her true legacy, tears of joy streaming down her face. "This is what teachers want most," she said to Steve. "Not to be remembered in abstract, but to see the concrete proof that love multiplies, that one person can ripple out into generations." Steve Harvey, who had interviewed thousands of people over his career, found himself speechless. He had witnessed many emotional moments, but this was different. This was a life's work made visible, love made tangible, legacy made real. "Miss Kate," he finally managed, "you said teachers believe in tomorrow even when they won't be there to see it. But you're wrong about one thing." Catherine looked at him with curiosity. "You will be there. Every time one of these students teaches their own children kindness. Every time they show compassion to a stranger. Every time they refuse to give up on someone who's been given up on. You'll be there." The studio erupted in applause, but it wasn't television applause. It was the sound of people witnessing something sacred, something that transcended entertainment and touched the essence of what it means to live a meaningful life. Catherine Wilson stood up, surrounded by 60 of her former students, and spoke her final words to the television audience. To every teacher watching, to every person who has ever planted a seed of hope in someone else's life, remember this: we don't teach subjects, we teach souls. We don't just prepare students for tests, we prepare them for life, and the love we give, the belief we share, that never dies. It just keeps growing, keeps spreading, keeps changing the world one heart at a time. The episode was unlike anything Family Feud had ever produced. It aired as a 2-hour special titled Miss Kate's Last Lesson and became the most watched program in the show's history. But more importantly, it sparked a national conversation about the value of teachers, the importance of recognizing those who serve others, and the power of love to create lasting change. Catherine Wilson passed away 14 weeks later, surrounded by family. But her death was not an ending. It was a commencement. The students she had taught carried her lessons forward. The teachers inspired by her story changed their own approach to education. The viewers who had watched her final lesson began looking for ways to be the kind of person who believes in others. Steve Harvey was forever changed by meeting Catherine Wilson. He established the Catherine Wilson Foundation for Educational Excellence, providing resources for teachers in underserved communities. Every year on the anniversary of that episode, he dedicates a show to celebrating teachers who go above and beyond. But most importantly, he learned that sometimes the most powerful television happens when you stop worrying about ratings and start caring about souls. The Fast Money round was never completed. The questions remained unanswered, the points uncounted, the prize money irrelevant. Because Catherine Wilson had already won everything that mattered. She had won the love of her students. She had won the respect of her colleagues. She had won the knowledge that her life had made a difference. And in those final months, she won something even more precious: the certainty that love, once given, never truly dies. It just takes new forms, touches new lives, and continues the endless work of making the world a little brighter, one